Welcome to the Owner's Box. My name is David Williams. I'm joined with my co-host and sponsor, Don Piero from the Empower Lab. Hi, Don.
Hi, David. Excited about today. Going to be a good podcast.
Well, I am also excited about this podcast. We're going to meet a really cool fellow from the Midwest who didn't realize he was an entrepreneur until he was 38. Welcome, Jim Leimkuhler.
Well, thank you very much, David and Don. It's great to be here today. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Don, where would you like to start? Because this guy's story is pretty darn good.
I think the best way to start, we talked in a previous podcast about Sam Longo being a contrapreneur, taking the contrarian approach. Today we've got an accidentalpreneur, a guy that didn't even know how bad he wanted to be one. So, Jim, take it away.
Jim, how do you feel about hearing that?
Well, it's probably pretty accurate because, I don't really think of myself as being an entrepreneur at all, okay? I just feel like I was lucky enough at some point in my life to kind of get this epiphany that said, you know what, I want to own something, and had to go out and figure out how to do it. And anyway, so I feel really blessed to have been able to figure that out, but it took me a while because I didn't have hardly any kind of experience or background being an entrepreneur.
Well, an epiphany. So why don't you tell us about that epiphany?
Well, I have a strange background because I was a journalism major in college. I worked in the publishing business for a while, but really liked the business side of it. And every time I'd look for another job or do something different, they say, "Oh, what do you want to write?" And I was like, "No, I want to get into business." And so I ended up going back to school, got my master's degree, became a CPA, and then transitioned to work in public accounting. And from there, I worked for a large public accounting firm who one of their clients happened to be Chiquita Brands. And this was in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so I got hired away by Chiquita after working on their audit for a couple of years. And Chiquita was buying some companies and bought one in Miami, Florida. I ended up moving there and worked there as their VP of Finance and Operations, and really loved that part of small business.
So for the listening audience, Chiquita Brands. So this is the banana people.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It was.
So you started in the banana business.
Yes. It
All
was.
right.
That's how I got into produce. And anyway, but I ended up moving back to Cincinnati after Hurricane Andrew redecorated our home, and we decided Miami wasn't the place for us. And I had a wife and two small children, and so when I got back there, Chiquita was maybe not doing financially as well, and they were laying off a lot of people in their mid-50s, and I'm like, I don't want to be somebody in my mid-50s and get laid off. I said, I've got to figure out how I can become an owner of something. I don't care what it is. And that's when I said, I've got to figure this thing out. So I ended up coming to Los Angeles, Chiquita had purchased this company in LA a couple years prior, and I'd always stayed in touch with the gentleman who was running it. And he said, hey, come back. I want to buy the company back from Chiquita. You can be my CFO, and you can have an equity piece, and let's figure this thing out together. I really did not want to move to Los Angeles. But with the opportunity, my life dream at that point to say, hey, I want to be an owner, I'll move to L.A.
And how old were you at this time?
I want to say 39, and anyway, so we made the move and came out here, and I was working as a CFO and trying to figure out the deal to buy the company back with this gentleman who was president, and then he unfortunately passed away just after a few months of being out here. And so my boss back in Cincinnati came out and says, well, what do you want to do, Jim? And I said, well, I don't know. He said, well, do you want to be the president? And I thought that sounded much better than being in the soup line. And so I said, okay, I'll give it a whirl. But, I didn't know a banana from a potato, and this company out here was big in the potato and onion business.
Take us back just for a second. When he died, there had to be some kind of a reaction from you. Tell us about that day.
Well, it was a crazy day because I had a meeting with him the day before. Got word later that night that he'd passed away, and so I came into work the next morning, to talk to everybody. And it was a shock at work. It was a shock personally because we were going to close on. We'd just bought a house. we were going to close on a house in 3 weeks here in Southern California, and I'm like, wow, what am I going to do now? And because he was the money and the brains behind everything, and it wasn't me. It was, he was it. So it was a big shock. And in fact, my dad even tells a story about when I called him to tell him about it. And he says, "You sounded pretty much like in a state of shock when you did that."
I can imagine.
Yeah, one of the things we like to do when we do these podcasts is, kind of share the high points, the low points, the points of what the heck am I going to do next. I imagine that was kind of one of them.
It was, but I don't know. I guess I just had blind faith that I would figure this thing out. And so what happened was I took over as president of the company in 1996, and in 2002 I got a phone call from Chiquita, who had just emerged from bankruptcy, and their new CEO called and said, "Hey, Jim, I understand you'd like to buy the company, and we just took it over after bankruptcy, and we want to divest of all of our non-core assets or businesses." And I said, "Sure, I do." And 2 days later, I sent an offer and put it on their desk, and obviously had to negotiate that deal over the next 10 months. And but I was able to put together a management buyout with 2 other partners, working partners in the business. And then I got an outside, he was a potato grower that I had gotten to know really well. And so he became our vehicle for a majority of the financing. And we scraped together all the money we could, and then went to him, and he funded the balance, and we paid him off over a period of time. So.
And just for the listening audience's understanding, you were in the potato business. You were literally selling potatoes to the grocery industry.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Fantastic. I have to ask this because I'm thinking about some of my own life experiences. But first you got to go home and tell your wife that the guy that just hired you passes away. And then you have to have another conversation not that long after to say, "Hey, I'm going to go buy this company." How did that conversation go?
Well, she knew that this was my dream, so it really was. It was an easy conversation. I think the thing to me though is when we were successful in buying it, the biggest feeling that went through my head was, we're not moving again, because we had lived. My first job was in Des Moines, Iowa. Moved to Ohio. Moved to Miami, Florida. Back to Ohio. Now here I'm in California, which we really didn't want to move out here, but we did. And now it was like, oh, we're not moving again. We're here. And but in the same token, that was a good feeling too, because it felt like, okay, now I've got the purpose. I've got equity. It's what I always wanted, and or at least wanted. After I figured out I didn't want to be the guy getting laid off when I'm 55. So it was a good feeling, and but probably didn't really know what I was getting myself into. But looking back on it, enjoyed it.
How did you finance the deal?
It was with cash. I mean, the 3 of us that were working in the business, we shook out every piggy bank that we had, and home equity lines of credit. And one gentleman, I think timing was good. He inherited a little bit of money, and somebody else went to a friend and begged, borrowed, and stole money, I think. And then our grower pitched in most of the big chunk of the cash.
So if this thing didn't go, what would that have meant for you?
Well, there was another gentleman that was bidding against us, and he was a friend of mine that I knew. He owned a big produce company in Texas, and we had told him all along that, hey, he's welcome to buy it. We just won't work for him. And anyway, he actually offered us a big pile of money to just go away, and we said no. And he said, well, don't you want to think about it? And I said, well, I just did. I told you no. And so, we somehow just figured out it was going to work. And
was it did you push all your chips in?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if it didn't go, if this deal wasn't successful and you couldn't keep the business flourishing, that would have been pretty bad conversation with the wife.
Yeah, that would have been a really bad conversation. So luckily,
the dream would have turned into a nightmare.
Yeah, but just so the listening audience knows, this gentleman was amazingly successful with this acquisition, and he's going to tell us more about it.
Yeah, one of the things is, right after we did acquire the business, it was a time in Southern California where there was a major grocery strike, and all of a sudden, all of our customers, half of them were on strike, and we didn't really know what was gonna, happen. And one of my partners, we had to call a little partner meeting, and we had to send one of them out to a customer that wasn't as affected and just basically beg for more business, and which we did. We got the business, and we also started doing some DSD, direct store delivery, to grocery stores and doing things, and that's where we got exposure into other product lines. And we always said, being the potato and onion business, it was kind of a small margin business, so we finally got our eyes opened up that maybe there's other things in the produce world that are a little bit more high margin. And anyway, so that turned out to be what we thought was a negative. Obviously, we learned something from it, and I think that's something I can always say, that no matter how bad things are, you'll learn stuff and you'll learn a new path.
Well, that's a theme with all of our entrepreneurs. Definitely, is that the hardships and those crisis opportunities are opportunities to learn, to grow, and to find new ways of doing business. And it sounds like that's how you diversified.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
The other thing is, being with Chiquita, they always said they had to grow by 15%. Well, I never really figured out how you could do that in a commodity-based business. So one of my philosophies early on was, we had annual budgets and we worked toward goals, but we were always about getting better. And one of our themes was, if we get better, we'll get bigger. And if we get bigger, we'll have to deal with it. So we never really had, say, we have to grow by 10% or 20% or whatever it was, because that was too hard. I couldn't quite comprehend that. Right now we just have to pay off our debt, but on the other side, let's just get better at everything we do. And if we do that, that'll lead to growth, and then we'll figure out how to deal with it and move on. And that philosophy worked.
Absolutely. I love what you're saying, because that also makes you more profitable when you get better at what you do. I don't understand that. That's like Chiquita and some of these large corporations, they come up with this arbitrary 15% growth. And perhaps, I don't know, I wasn't there, but perhaps if they'd worried about being better and putting more money to the bottom line, they wouldn't have had to deal with a bankruptcy.
True. I can't agree more.
My father used to put it this way: there's no point in putting in money in one pocket and taking it out of the other.
True.
Jim, I know one of the unique things about your business is that you had partners, as you've shared. And one of the things that I've observed in the time I've spent working with you is that you were just excellent at managing your partners. Share with our audience a little bit about how you approach partnership and what you think was the reason why it worked out so well.
Well, Don, that's a great question, and also one in which I'm proud to answer, because I really felt like I was blessed with, I'll say 3 good partners, or great partners. Probably the best thing is that everybody understood their role, and everybody had their own role, and everybody looked at each other and said, hey, what you do, I can't do, and what I do, you can't do. So, nobody was jealous of the other guy saying, hey, well, I think I can do what he's doing better, and then that leads into conflict. So, we'd have meetings, and everybody would get up from the meeting and go do what they had to do to, again, make us better. So I think that's, I think having partners that are diverse and that all have their own talents is a key. If you're always thinking, hey, I can do my partner's job better than he can or she can, that leads to too much conflict. And whereas we just would sit at meetings and say, hey, let's go. And one of my partners basically said something very succinctly at one time. He said, hey, Jim, he says, we have one head and 2 arms, and you're the head, we're the 2 arms, and you're the guy, thinking about stuff, and we just go out and we go do it. So I think we kind of all had their role, but that kind of worked for our team. And the other thing is our financial partner, I always kept him informed. He knew we had board meetings at least twice a year, maybe more often, I can't remember, but he was always informed of the good and the bad and the ugly, and we always wanted to be upfront. And we kept our books one way when we were owned by Chiquita, and we always just kept keeping our books the same way. and it was always just straightforward. And so everybody knew there was nothing, no secrets among the partners or even with our financial partner. Everybody was on the same page.
Was that is that a function of luck, an alignment of the stars, or was there some strategic positioning on your part to align yourself with the right people?
I just knew that, I mean, really, to be successful, you have to be aligned with the right people. And I picked my partners carefully. We actually had a CFO at the time who kind of maybe wanted to be a partner, but wasn't the right one. Worked great working for a big company or reporting into a big company, but I didn't think would be as good working for a small business. And anyway, but I picked one partner because he was the best salesperson I'd ever met. And I picked the other partner because he brought a lot of knowledge that I didn't know. My background was more finance and operations. I didn't know anything about sales or marketing. Okay, so I hired another guy to work on marketing. Also, maybe knew more about customers and talking to people at higher up with customers that I wasn't comfortable. And because I was taking over the CEO president role from a gentleman who, the gentleman that passed away, he was a selling CEO. That wasn't me, and so we had to fill those gaps, and it ended up working well. So
yeah, my experience has been that there are two kinds of partnerships: good ones and really bad ones. And I've been fortunate to have some really good partnerships. And I agree with you, and I think that's something I would want the listening audience to take away with. And that is as you're looking at being in a partnership, you want to be in a partnership with somebody who complements your strengths and rises up in the areas where you're not strong. And I think you also have to, be really mindful of this is a marriage, this is a relationship, and when it goes sideways, it gets really ugly. So you want to scrutinize that partnership and make sure it's right for you.
Oh, you have to. I mean, you just absolutely have to, and it's the only way it's going to work.
Well, what about conflicts? It sounds like there were very few, but I can't imagine that you didn't escape them entirely. What's your advice on how to handle conflict, even when it rarely arises in a partnership?
Well, to be honest, we didn't have too many conflicts over the years. And again, it goes back to everybody understood their role. And so there wasn't a lot of overlap. And, I had one of my partners, he always said, when I'd put a sheet of paper in front of him and say, hey, you need to sign this, he'd just sign it. And he wouldn't even look at it. And I'd say, well, shouldn't you look at it? And he goes, Jim, if it's good for you, it's good for me. And that's how he operated. And so we didn't have a lot of conflict. And when we did, we just talked it out. And as best we could. It wasn't always perfect, but at least we tried to address it. So,
a high level of trust, it sounds like.
Absolutely. I mean, I never, it was a crazy 7-day-a-week business. It still is. And people worked, it's 24 hours a day. And, I worked I worked every Saturday for over 20 some odd years. And so, but I never worried about where my partners were and were they working on the business or not. I always knew that they were. And, if I had to worry about that, then I had the wrong partner. So.
Well said. Jim, we're really interested in hearing about some of the highs and lows, and even more interested in the ahas that you captured in this life experience. Could you share a little bit about all of that?
Sure. I think one of the interesting thing was, coming from Cincinnati and moving to Los Angeles, I didn't know anybody out here when I first came. And when my predecessor, when he passed away, a lot of people that are in the produce business in Southern California kept saying, well, Progressive's probably going to go out of business. They've got a bean counter from Cincinnati running this company who knows nothing about produce, so we just got to give it time and it'll be gone. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, well, I don't want this thing to, I think I can, I know I can run this thing. And so, I just stuck with it and tried to figure it out and tried to meet some other people in the business that could teach me a little bit about the goings and comings of produce in Southern California. And so I just kind of worked through that the best I could. But it, you know, I didn't like the fact that people were doubting me right out of the chute, and it kind of hurt. But you know, I figured, okay, I'll figure it out.
It seems like we've got to just emphasize this moment. In every podcast, we've had that moment where we could see that fire in the belly, that little magic spark that everybody that falls into this ownership role just seems to have.
Yeah, and that was really because again, I wasn't an owner then, but the good news is Progressive we were such a small company to Chiquita, we ran it totally autonomously. In fact, there was a time that I didn't even talk to my boss in Cincinnati for a year and a half, and they just let me keep running the business, and so the good news is, even though we weren't owners, we ran it like we were. So when the day came that we got that call that had a chance to buy it, we knew what we were going to do. We just had to go figure it out at that point in time.
Just tell somebody with entrepreneurial spirit they can't, and see what happens.
Right.
Or they won't.
Right. Well, one of my things that I kind of always say is, don't underestimate your ability to succeed. And I think there's a lot of times I might have doubted myself a few times, but then I found out that guess what? I'm just as smart as somebody else, and somebody else running another business. You know what? I can do it. Just as well. Who knows? Maybe better. I don't know, but I'm not going to be worse. And that's what we kept saying a lot. Is like, hold it. There's the three partners that were working in the business. We know we're working really hard. We're trying to work really smart. You know what? We'll probably figure this thing out. And because we figured, other people, they may be working hard too, or maybe not, but we think we can do it just as well, if not better. So again, we just kept just kept on that journey.
Well, the proof is in the potato, I guess, because you ended up outworking and outsmarting everyone else.
Well, I don't know about outsmarting, but we had a lot of fun, and I feel very, very fortunate to have gotten that opportunity to buy it. And there were lows. I mean, I never will forget the call I got when my accounting manager called and said, "Jim, we only have $25,000 in the bank." And my first question is, when's payroll? And luckily it was a week and a half away. Well, it turned out we just had a customer that failed to pay us, a major customer or two, for about 3 or 4 weeks. So we were able to quickly correct that problem, but that was a little scary.
A little hard in the stomach?
Yeah, because, and I don't know, I think it was prior at that point or before, but whatever, we always, every day, one of my controller would send me a cash report. I'd know how much money we got in the bank, how many outstanding checks we have, and every day I could see that. And anyway, so one thing I always said. In fact, when I spoke at one of my son's entrepreneurship class at USC, and they asked me, is cash king? I said, no, it's not only king, it's queen, jack, queen, 10, ace, it's everything. And in a small business, it definitely is everything that counts. So,
yeah, absolutely. I can tell you, in speaking with a lot of entrepreneurs and going from my own experience, I think one of the big fears is making the payroll and making sure you make that payroll, because once you miss a payroll, you're dust. Right. It's hard to come back from missing a payroll.
And we've all had at least one that we were sweating right to the last minute.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's, we had our business, it opens, in fact, it hardly ever shuts down. So when I would get there at 4:35, 5:30 in the morning, whatever time, there's a ramp. I would walk up into the side of the building, and when you walk in, you go in there, and it's 4:30 in the morning, and you got all the machines are going, and you got people on forklifts, trucks are getting loaded, and you're seeing all this activity. And when you're walking in every morning, it was kind of like, wow, I'm responsible for all these people and their families, and I hope I make, more right decisions than wrong ones today. And if I make a wrong one, I hope I fix it pretty quick. And so every day it was kind of that eye-opening, but it also, it gave me a lot of motivation, because we had a lot of wonderful employees, and, they motivated me to work harder. And there's people that, to this day I go over there, and even though I'm not affiliated today, but I still go over there and they, see me, and we still have great conversations, and it's good to see people.
Well, speaking of still going over there came a point where you decided to sell the company. Why don't you take us along that journey?
Yeah, that's true. We grew, we were growing the business at a pretty rapid rate. Again, just by getting better. Okay, and the amount of cash that it was taking, and I'd show up with my three partners would get together, and I don't know, it always worked out, but nobody would bring their wallet. So don't know how David, if you've ever had that experience. But anyway, it just took a lot of capital to keep growing, and I just knew it was time that we just needed to look for a partner, and that could help with that growth and help fuel with it. And again, we had owned it, we'd run it for a long time, not a long time, but we're getting to the age where some of our partners might want to be doing something different. So it was time that let's at least explore it, because one thing that I learned, that if you sell your company too soon, it can still be very good. But if you sell late, it's generally not very good. So I don't know if somebody told me that, or I figured it out, or whatever, but I think that was good wisdom that said, hey, it's time to take some chips off the table. So we did look for a partner, and were able to find one, and it worked out really, really well, where we sold 65% of the company in February of 2016.
And when you found this suitor, did you do that on your own? Did you go out to investment banking community and say, hey, let's market this thing?
Yes, we used an investment banker. I'd become acquainted with one a few years earlier when I'd gotten kind of a valuation of the company, and so anyway, we used them, and then we went through a formal process. And I must admit, when we were all said and done, the investment banker looked at me and said, Jim, he said, you ran a perfect process, and it worked, the whole thing from start to finish. We ended up with 5 or 6 bidders at the end, and we picked one that we thought was the best for us, which was an international produce company that owned 150 produce companies around the world, and they're not interested in it's not true private equity in the sense, hey, we're gonna grow it in 3 to 5 years and sell it. They own these companies for 50 or 100 years. So that was the kind of company that we wanted to find, not only for us, but for our employees, and stability, and for what we thought the company could be.
You've been so strategic in your career. I think about, it's like a textbook exit that you just described, and how perfect is that? And I imagine that you got a great valuation for the company because of that. So many times, and I know Don has this in his in Power Lab, we talk to entrepreneurs and business owners who haven't really given any thought to an exit strategy or an exit plan, and they leave a lot of chips on the floor, on the table. So what do you say to that, to those people who are listening, who are thinking someday I might want to sell my business?
Well, again, I go back to what I said. I think you're better to do it, too soon than too late. Because even in talking to my investment banker, he said, Jim, you don't realize most of the calls I get about somebody having a business to sell is, well, it's the widow or the widower saying, my husband or spouse just passed away, and I've got this business I don't know anything about. I've been trying to run it for 3 years, and the sales keep going down, down, and down. Now I need to sell. And that doesn't sound like a good scenario to me. So, and again, I had multiple partners. If this was my own business, maybe I would have done something different. But again, I'm trying to satisfy a combination of needs and wants.
Sure.
It's not just me. I had to look at what my other partners were wanting, or what I think they might want, and get out, or I'll say take the chips off the table at a time when it made sense for the majority of us.
Hey, Jim, what about mentors along the way for you? I know you were a member of one of the Empower Lab groups and had that peer board, but besides that, what comes to mind when you think of the people that might have been mentors to you coming along the way?
Well, I can look at one when I worked in Miami, Florida, for a gentleman who owned a banana company who sold it to Chiquita. And when I first moved there, this was a guy in his 60s, and he he taught me a lot about small business, how to treat people, culture, the value of culture, the value of just leadership. And so he was instrumental in getting me to that next, I'll say, really. So when I got back to Cincinnati, it was like, that's what I want to do. How do I get there? And how do I be an owner? So that's one for sure. And I must admit, being in your Empower Lab group, and just, I wish I would have had that from the day that I started or came to LA, because I didn't know anybody. And so I think that having a peer group there that you could learn from, I learned a lot from your group, and that worked well for me. I wish I would have had it on day one when I came to LA, but I didn't know you then.
I think that's going to be a soundbite for you, Don, in future podcasts there, because that was quite an advertisement, but I couldn't agree more. The peer group process has been one of the most meaningful contributors to my success.
So, Jim, pearls of wisdom, takeaways, things you'd want to pass on to our listeners that will really help them if they get that fire in their belly to start something on their own.
Well, first of all, I think if you get a chance, take it. I think, I feel lucky that I got a chance and I took it. Some people never get a chance, but other people get a chance and then they don't take it. So I feel very blessed that I got a chance and I took it and ran with it. And I feel blessed, and looking back that all worked out. Along that journey, there was one thing that I learned early on, hire for attitude and train for skill. And I've always kind of lived by that, because, and even, I think when you go out there and you hire somebody, sometimes you have this job description and you're trying to just make the perfect fit from a job description standpoint. But there's other times where you can look at somebody and say, well, this candidate, they might have all the skills, but boy, their attitude, and I think they'll be a culture fit. Those kind of hires we made over the years worked out so much better than the ones that we said tried to fit the person into the box of the job description. And those, we had a higher failure rate of those. So, hire people that have the right attitude and let them fill out the bottom half of their job description with what they can do. And I think you'll end up with a bigger pile of people that work out well for you. The other thing is, when we looked at people, we came up with some core values late in this whole process, but that was mainly to get them all down on paper as we transitioned to new ownership. But one of the things we always said, and I said this for many years, and so when we put together these core values, it kind of popped out. But I mean, the street version is, we had to hire people that had their own battery pack, because we didn't provide extension cords to plug them in every day. That was way too hard for us. But for us, it came back to, hey, we bring energy and a great attitude every day. And, that's the kind of people we wanted to hire. So if you can find people out there that have your own battery pack, they're gonna help make your company successful. And anyway, so that's, one thing that I would like to pass on.
Well, Jim, I had to take a break because I had to unplug the extension cord to several of the employees around here. But kidding aside, what are you doing now? What's your life look like?
Well, it's obviously quite different from coming from working 6 days a week to, but I enjoyed the business a lot. I'm glad I sold when I did, and because again, this business took a lot, and I always said I don't have a variable speed motor. I have an on and off switch. So it was time to, slowing down really wasn't an option. It was kind of just, okay, you got to figure out how you turn the switch off. So once I was able to figure that out and exit from the 65%, but then we eventually sold the 35%, which was a management group that's obviously still there today, but that includes my son, and he's part of that 35% as an owner. And so, we don't talk shop all the time. I like to enjoy my grandkids and make Thanksgiving dinner and Christmas dinner without getting into business. But we stay in touch, and he talks about stuff and what's going on, and I give him a little advice if I can, if he needs it, and I'm still right now still remaining as chairman of the board, probably for another year, and just to kind of keep my finger in it and keep maybe a little just some of the knowledge transfer over time to the new management group. So,
what's your son's name?
Scott.
Well, Scott, if you ever happen to be listening to this podcast, how fortunate are you to have a dad with this kind of experience and intelligence to guide you? I just want to add that.
Well, that's very kind of you to say that, because anyway, I feel like I've just been lucky in my career to do what I wanted to do every day, and I was thankful and just blessed that I didn't really feel like I worked for those 25 years of Progressive. So,
well, and like it or not, you're the mentor now.
Well, thanks, Don.
You bet.
Well, I so much appreciate your time, Jim. I feel like I've actually walked away with a few nuggets that I wasn't expecting, so thank you for that. Don?
Couldn't agree more. Always enjoy time with Jim and learn some things today myself hadn't heard before. Quite a story.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate the time being here. It's been a great day.
And with that, we'll see you next time.